In 2009, a small New Jersey startup rejected an offer from the most dangerous company in retail, and within weeks, it started losing money it didn't know it could lose. Two founders had spent 5 years building something Walmart couldn't touch and Amazon wanted badly, a website that sold diapers. Just diapers, nothing else. That should have made them safe. It didn't. Within months, the price of diapers on Amazon dropped by 30%. Then it dropped again. Executives at the startup ran an experiment. They quietly lowered their own prices just to see what would happen. Amazon matched them within hours, as if watching every move in real time. That's because it was. Here's where it stops looking like a normal price war. The startup was hemorrhaging money it never had. Walmart swooped in and offered to buy them out, but in a closed-door room with Amazon's own negotiators, the founders were told something that should terrify every business owner in America. Jeff Bezos would drive the price of diapers to zero before he'd let them win. Not lose money, zero. By November 2010, they sold for $545 million. And then came the twist almost nobody saw coming. Amazon shut the company down 7 years later, having never made it profitable. It didn't matter. The point was never the diapers. The point was the message sent to every founder watching: compete with Amazon and you will lose money faster than you can raise it. At first, this looks like a simple story about a bully with deep pockets. It isn't. Amazon has spent most of its existence deliberately losing money on purpose, by design, with shareholders' full blessing. And somewhere inside that contradiction is a second, quieter question nobody asks. How does a company that so often refuses to turn a profit end up more powerful than the ones that chase profit every quarter? That wasn't even Amazon's biggest advantage. There's a third thread running underneath both of these, one most people never connect to diapers or .com losses at all, a side project inside Amazon's own offices that had nothing to do with retail and eventually became more profitable than everything else the company does combined. Almost nobody noticed it happening. By the time they did, it was too late to compete with it. This is the story of how a company built on losing money became one of the most feared forces in the global economy, and the strange, counterintuitive truth about why that strategy actually works. In 1997, Amazon went public at $18 a share. The prospectus said in plain language that the company was not profitable and had no clear plan to become so. Most companies would have been laughed out of the market. Investors poured in anyway. Here's the strange part. Bezos told the New York Times something that sounded almost insane for a CEO to admit publicly. It would be the easiest thing in the world to make Amazon profitable right now, and it would also be the stupidest decision any management team could make. Read that again. The founder of the company was publicly bragging about how easy it would be to succeed by everyone else's definition and refusing to do it. He wasn't being reckless. He was running an experiment most executives were too afraid to try, deliberately refusing profit in exchange for something Wall Street couldn't easily price: dominance. For 6 straight years, Amazon lost money, not small amounts. By 2001, the company had lost close to $3 billion since its IPO. Employees wore shirts with Bezos' mantra printed across the chest: "Get big fast." $3 billion. Gone. And Bezos wasn't panicking. He was waiting. Then, in the fourth quarter of 2001, something happened that even skeptics didn't expect. Amazon posted a profit: $5 million, 1 cent a share. It sounds small. It wasn't. It was proof of concept for a strategy nobody else had the stomach to run at scale, and it set the pattern for the next 2 decades. But here's what almost nobody noticed at the time. The profit didn't come from selling more books. It came from something happening quietly in the background of the business, a shift in how Amazon thought about growth itself. And that shift is where the real story begins. Ask most people why Amazon wins, and they'll say the same thing: low prices, fast shipping, huge selection. That's the visible layer. It's also the least interesting part of the story. Picture a massive iron flywheel, the kind old factories use to power entire assembly lines. It's brutally heavy. Pushing it the first inch takes everything you've got, and for a long time, nothing seems to happen. But once it starts turning, every push after that gets easier because the wheel itself carries the momentum forward. That's the real mechanism. Lower prices bring more customers. More customers attract more sellers because sellers go where the buyers already are. More sellers mean more selection. More selection brings even more customers. And at every turn, more volume means Amazon can push its costs per item down further, which funds even lower prices. Each piece feeds the next piece. It doesn't need to be explosive, it just needs to keep turning. For years, that wheel barely moved. Then it stopped being a business plan and started being a machine nobody could stop. That's the part that made investors uneasy for years and terrified competitors for decades. A flywheel doesn't reward quarterly thinking, it punishes it. Every dollar competitors extracted as profit to satisfy shareholders was a dollar Amazon reinvested into shipping speed, warehouse density, or price cuts, widening the gap another notch. Traditional retailers were built to answer to Wall Street every 90 days. Amazon was building something that only made sense over 10 years. That difference in time horizon is the closest thing to a hidden superpower in modern business, and almost nobody accounts for it when they try to compete. There's a psychological piece to this too, one that has nothing to do with spreadsheets. Most executives are wired to protect this quarter's number. Losing money on purpose year after year requires a kind of discomfort tolerance that boards rarely allow and that shareholders almost never forgive unless they've been convinced, the way Amazon's investors were, that the losses are actually a form of investment rather than a failure. That belief, more than any single tactic, is what let the flywheel spin long enough to matter. Then, in 2005, the flywheel got a new gear, and this one didn't just speed things up, it changed the psychology of every customer who touched it. Amazon Prime. For a flat annual fee, customers got fast, free shipping on almost everything, which sounds like a minor convenience until you see what it actually did to buyer behavior. Once someone had already paid for unlimited shipping, every purchase on Amazon effectively felt free at the point of sale. Customers stopped compass shopping. They just clicked buy. One membership program, an entire generation of shoppers rewired. But a flywheel spinning in retail explains dominance in retail. It doesn't explain why a company that sells socks and paperbacks now touches nearly every corner of the global economy: banking infrastructure, hospital systems, film studios, grocery chains, even the servers running the CIA's classified data. That requires a second engine, and almost nobody saw it coming because it wasn't born in a boardroom. It was born out of an internal headache. The side project that became the real business. Around 2003, Amazon's own engineers were drowning. Every new internal tool needed its own servers, its own storage, its own security. Teams kept rebuilding the same infrastructure from scratch for every new project, like every department in a city building its own private power plant instead of plugging into a shared electrical grid. So a small group inside the company began standardizing it. Build the computing power once as a shared internal utility and let every team plug into it instead of reinventing it from scratch. Then someone asked the question that changed everything. If this power grid is this useful to us, why not sell electricity to the rest of the city too? That side project became Amazon Web Services, cloud computing sold to anyone who needed it, from three-person startups to Fortune 500 banks. It sounds unrelated to diapers and books. It wasn't. It was the same instinct aimed somewhere nobody else was looking. Instead of only selling products to customers, sell the infrastructure that other businesses depend on to function at all. Here's where everything changes. Today, that cloud division generates a share of Amazon's operating profit disproportionate to its size relative to the retail business, funding price wars, faster shipping, and acquisitions the retail side alone could never afford. Think about what that actually means. The thin, painful profit margins on a package of diapers were never meant to fund the whole empire. They were meant to buy market share and customer loyalty, while a separate, far more profitable business quietly picked up the bill. Retail was the lose leader for the entire company, and almost nobody outside Amazon realized it until the cloud division's numbers became too large to hide in quarterly filings. That's the part most competitors never saw coming, and by the time they did, there was nothing symmetrical left to fight. A traditional retailer trying to out-discount Amazon was competing against a rival with a second income stream funding the war. It was never a fair fight. It was never even the same fight. Retail brought the customers, the infrastructure business brought the money, and that combination is where the real strategy starts to come into focus. Diapers.com wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. In 2017, Amazon paid roughly $13.7 billion for Whole Foods, a company that on paper had nothing to do with e-commerce. The purchase gave Amazon something it couldn't build fast enough on its own: hundreds of physical locations inside wealthy neighborhoods across the country, instantly converted into grocery delivery hubs and return points. Zappos, the online shoe retailer, was acquired for over $1 billion in 2009, not because Amazon desperately needed to sell shoes, but because Zappos had built a reputation for customer service that Amazon wanted inside its own walls. Two acquisitions, two completely different industries, same underlying logic. Identify whatever piece of the economy could eventually threaten the flywheel and absorb it before it grows large enough to fight back. Regulators eventually took notice, and this is where the story gets genuinely controversial. There's a legal term for what critics accuse Amazon of doing in cases like Diapers.com: predatory pricing. Strip away the jargon and the accusation is simple: deliberately sell below cost, bleed a smaller rival dry until it can't survive alone, then let prices drift back up once the competition is gone. It's a serious accusation, and it's contested. The Federal Trade Commission actually reviewed and approved the Quidsi acquisition back in 2010. But years later, some of the very legal scholars who studied that case, most notably antitrust researcher Lina Khan, argued publicly that regulators got it wrong and that the deal should never have been allowed to happen. Whether or not you think that's fair, one thing is clear. The strategy is not an accident. It has been running the same way in public view for more than 2 decades, which raises the real question buried underneath all of this. If the goal isn't just to sell more products than everyone else, what is Amazon actually building toward? Here is the perspective shift that most explanations of Amazon miss entirely. Amazon doesn't need to win every market it enters. It needs to become the infrastructure that other companies and other markets depend on to operate, so that even when a competitor wins a customer, Amazon still gets paid. Sit with that for a second. A shopper who buys a rival brand on a rival website may still have that package delivered through Amazon's logistics network. A small business that never sells a single item on Amazon.com might still run its entire website on Amazon's cloud servers. A grocery chain competing directly with Whole Foods might still process its own transactions on Amazon Web Services without ever realizing the irony. This is the difference between a company and an ecosystem. A company wins when it beats its competitors. An ecosystem wins even when its competitors think they're winning, because the ecosystem is underneath them, collecting a toll regardless of the outcome. That's the actual plan hiding behind the phrase, "take over the world." It was never about becoming the biggest store. It was about becoming impossible to avoid. A layer of infrastructure so deeply embedded in commerce, logistics, and computing that competing with any single Amazon business means indirectly still paying Amazon to do it. Remember the diaper company from the beginning of this story? It wasn't just fighting a retailer. It was fighting a company that had already decided retail was only the entry point, the visible half of a much larger structure being built underneath the entire economy, one flywheel turn at a time. That's the uncomfortable truth about how modern dominance actually works. It rarely announces itself. It rarely needs to win the fight you can see because it's already positioned to profit from the fight you can't. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing for more stories that uncover the hidden mechanics behind the world's biggest companies. Here's the question worth sitting with. How many of the businesses you use every day, the ones that feel like Amazon's competitors, are quietly paying Amazon to survive?